Yikes, my notes disappeared. Okay, there we go.
You know, what's funny is like working from home for 7+ months now, and people from work are just telling me new stuff about Zoom. They're like, hey, did you know you could do this? And I was like, why didn't you tell me this 5 months ago? Like, crazy.
Please, camera. Oh my God, it's always this camera.
We can see you now, though, at least.
It froze again. I think it's the webcam acting up. Oh my goodness. Been trying to fix it for like a week. It's still acting up.
I can hear you good, so that works too.
Just freeze. Just stay frozen.
Just get ready to, like, when you open it up again, just like have like a perfect then you'll be good. I see David is in the crowd.
All right. I'm gonna exit out again and not use this camera and see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. We're still getting set up. Yep. David says hello.
What up, David?
Right. There we go. That's just using my computer camera.
It works. That's better than before.
Yeah. This webcam's cursed. I don't know what's wrong with it.
Oh, good. Although people's things disappeared. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, with just hanging out on paper. No.
Emotionally, I feel that.
I can just picture it chilling on the couch, watching everyone.
All right.
A couple more minutes, let everybody join, it looks like. Oh God, I gotta like silence my notifications.
Meeting is being recorded. Yes.
And we're live.
All right.
And you're ready, good to go whenever you want. All right. Sounds good. To everybody here in attendance, thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to the Academy of Art University's first annual Lock, Stock, Tech, and Art Alumni Panel, brought to you by the School of Game Development. And we're super happy and honored to be joined by 4 of our alumni this evening. We have Danielle Olson, Catherine Premsberger, Maddie Christian, and Krista Frost. So I'm happy to see all of you. 3 of you I know fairly well, so 1 of you I don't, so I'll be looking forward to learning more about everybody this evening. And what we're going to do for this panel is I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions based on whatever answers I'm getting from who I'm asking. I may riff on a few things to get some more information, but I want everyone to know that you are more than welcome to put questions in there, and we will keep an eye on questions in Zoom chat to see if anybody has anything they would like to ask. So I will go through a person at a time and let's get some introductions. So let's start with Danielle. First of all, tell us a little bit about what you do, like where you're currently working.
Hey everyone. I am currently a technical artist at Amazon working on the simulation robotics team.
Cool. What does that mean exactly? That sounds crazy.
I've spent the last decade since I left the academy in the games industry. So this is sort of my first departure into a more practical industry. But I'm still making video games. It's just for robots this time.
Oh, wow. So the robots are playing the video games?
Pretty much, in a conceptual sort of way. Yeah, we're making the software that the robots run 1,000 times a night so that they can get their AI spun up faster.
Interesting. And can you say what this AI might be used for? Or is it going to be cars or something that's going to take over the world? Or what is that?
Yeah, I'm on the Amazon Scout team. And if you Google that, there's a pretty good article that sort of describes our team and what we do and sort of the way the simulation works.
Okay, cool. All right. I have lots of questions about that, but we'll come back to that topic. Catherine Premsberger, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're working and what you do right now?
All right. I'm actually I have a really long title. It's a associate content game designer at Jam City.
And what, so yeah, that is a long title. You're an associate. What does associate mean for people who might not know?
An associate is like, surprisingly, this is the first time I've gotten that. So it's kind of like you're not like a junior per se, but you're also not like a senior or like something below a senior. So you would do stuff that's expected of the content game designer, but you have lesser responsibilities, and they can fall back on you to do some of their responsibilities. In this case, I design levels for match 3 levels for Cookie Jam Blast.
Okay, great. And that is over at, sorry, which company? That's at
Jam City.
Jam
I'm
City.
in the
I always get Jam
San Diego
City
studio.
Yeah, I always get Jam City and Pocket Gems mixed up for some reason. That's cool. All right, great, thank you. Krista, where are you working right now and what do you do?
Hey, so I work for Visual Concepts Entertainment, which is a 2K studio, and I'm a technical artist on the NBA 2K franchise. Yeah.
And that's that beautiful 2K complex up at Bakerfield, right? Baker or?
It's in Marin, actually.
Right. So if you're driving up north in the North Bay, you will pass by it. It's like this big old military airfield with these cool hangars.
Yes.
And they converted that over to 2K Studios. And is Toys for Bob right there too?
Toys for Bob is in the same, it's not in our same building, but it's just a few hangars down. But yeah, Hangar 13 is in our buildings because they're also a 2K studio. Yeah.
Cool. Everyone gets a cool hangar.
Yeah.
You get a hangar and you get a hangar. And did they put air conditioning in those hangars yet?
They did.
Yeah, the last time I went up there.
Too well.
Yeah, the last time I went up there was for an interview and it was like 90 degrees in there. It was very uncomfortable.
Yeah, during my interview, it was the complete opposite. It was like 50 degrees in there and I was freezing.
Oh my goodness. Not optimal interview conditions.
Yeah.
All right. And finally, we have Maddie Christian. So what can you tell us about what you do and where you're working right now?
All right, well, cool. Hi, guys. My name's Maddie. I work with the environment art team over at 31st Union, which is also another 2K studio. We're pretty new. We used to be called 2K SV, so 2K Silicon Valley, because we are located in San Mateo. And then we announced our new studio name just this past February. So yeah, brand new studio. It's been fun.
And what are you doing there? You're junior prop artist, right?
Yeah, so my title is associate prop modeler, but I have essentially been moved on to full-fledged environment work. So making modular kits, working on foliage, doing world building, all that fun stuff.
Well, congratulations. For those people who don't know, like, what does a prop artist do?
So a prop artist, they can move between characters and environments. So you can move back and forth between the teams. It really kind of depends on the size of your studio as well. When I was in school, I was more interested in environment art. So when I was applying for jobs, I was applying for environment positions, and they hired me on to kind of like see how I would grow into the role. And within like about a month, they were like, okay, environment stuff, we want you to work through that. So I still do prop stuff for environments, but like I said, I'm working on bigger fish to fry at this point.
That's great. Well, that's amazing. Just a month to go from one position to the other. That's fantastic. Okay, I will get into the bulk of the questions now. And one of my favorites is I will go to each of you to ask this. And we'll start with Danielle. We'll go back to the top of the batting order again. Video games. Why video games? Now take yourself back to being like a little kid. Were video games something you were always interested in? Was it just like a hobby, pastime, passion? How did you get from being young to being in college and actually studying video games and then a career? And I know that's a long question, so let's start with the beginning part. Like, what were your influences like growing up?
When I was a kid, let's see, must have been somewhere around 8 years old. I have a vivid memory of playing with my friends. You know, my parents were having a party, and so all the kids were outside playing. I remember climbing a basketball hoop and pretending I was a Zergling because I lived in the world of StarCraft. Whenever, you know, people were getting together like that, I was usually trying to hide in the corner of the party. I remember this because the people we went to, the Arnies, that was their last name. So we would all go over and have the party there, and I would go into their computer room and play StarCraft while everyone else was out playing.
The life of the party, huh?
And so just throughout my childhood, video games were just a natural place for me to be. You know, there's such a beauty in the progression of the game. It always appealed to me to have that rule set that you can explore, and just when you find that perfect amount of flow, you are totally engaged, you're a little bit challenged, but you're still making progress. That was just such a good example of how I wanted life to be.
That's awesome. I was just hearing a lot about that flow term the other day, and a lot of students don't understand what flow is. Flow for me, like I get it from like shoot 'em ups, like Japanese bullet hell type games where I'm avoiding bullets. You get into this sort of this Zen meditative state between you and the game. Is that similar to what you went through then with StarCraft and other games?
Yeah, my favorite example is, you know, the titled game Flow by Genova Chen. And you know, I think anyone, if they're curious about Flow, playing that is a great place to start, and reading his paper.
Great. And your interest in video games, like how was that received by like family and friends? Like, were they like, oh, you know, we got a nerdy kid here, or were they like encouraging of it, or?
I played most in the early hours of the morning and late at night after, especially my mom had gone to sleep, because she was always trying to get me to, you know, go play outside with the rest of the kids. Yeah, it was not a popular thing, I think, when most of us were young, especially for girls, I think. Yeah, it was definitely a sort of niche activity, especially when the internet sort of came about, and it was not the popular kid thing to do.
All right. And when you decided to go to school to learn all of this, were your parents supportive? Were they like, oh my gosh, video games, amazing, go for it? Or were they like, have you thought about like a doctor or a lawyer?
I was considering 3 schools. I was considering MIT, the Air Force Academy, and the Academy of Art.
Okay, that's a widespread.
I decided that MIT and Air Force Academy, I was going to have a tough time following all of their rules, and I wanted to make my own, and it seemed like the Academy was the best place to do that.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Let's move along. Let's get Catherine next, and I'll ask you the same question, sort of, what were your inspirations? Like, what got you into video games? Were you always into it? Did everything lead to this point in your life?
I've always played video games, like as long as I could remember. My earliest memories, let's see, like back when I was like 4 or something, I would go to my cousin's house because they had every console. They had the Nintendo 64, the GameCube when it came out, PS1, PS2, and that's like we just would go over there and play during sleepovers and stuff like that. And then we would play Smash Bros. Mainly like all the time, and Mario Party 4 and 5 on the GameCube. I don't remember the Nintendo 64 game, but I remember being pretty in love with it. So I was always a diehard fan of games. And one day when I was like 7 or 8, I was like, why do I always have to go to my cousin's house to play games? Why don't I have any at home? That's just weird. I feel like I should have them here. And then I got my first GameCube at 8 for my birthday, and I've just been a Nintendo fan ever since. So Shigeru Miyamoto is a very big inspiration for me, especially with Zelda games. I'm a diehard Zelda fan.
Yeah, me as well. Other than Breath of the Wild, I am also a big diehard Miyamoto fan. And what sort of helped you make your decision that it was like, hey, this is not only something I like to do just for fun playing, but this is something I might be interested in doing with my life? Like, how did that decision come about?
Interestingly enough, like this is going a little back, but when I was a kid, I really, really wanted to be a meteorologist or an astronomer. And over time, as I took more science classes, like just going through middle school and high school, especially high school when I took physics, I was so sure I was going to be a scientist, like diehard. I'm going to be a physics, like a physics person or astronomer or a cosmologist or something. But in my senior year, I just sat down and went, do I want to do that with my life? Is that going to make it fulfilling? Because I like that stuff, but I don't know if I want it as a career. And I settled on games because I was like, that's something I like to do, but I don't know anything about them. So let's go look at schools with the majors. I came across Academy of Art, and there was a lot of things talking about how they help you teach, like they teach you art from the ground up. And I was not an art student before that. And then I got that was like my first acceptance, and I was like, hell yeah, let's go.
That's awesome. Well, you still got plenty of time to make that game about the weather, right?
I've been trying to come up with games. It's a little hard.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And Krista, what about you? Like, how did you get into games? Were you into games when you were very young? Like, what was your growing up like?
Yeah, like I was really into playing video games when I was a kid. Like I was obsessed with The Sims 2. That was my favorite game. I would play video games at my friend Allie's house. We would play Halo and eat coffee ice cream and like stay up super late. And that was awesome. That was like our tradition.
Nice.
And I would play at like my after school program back in like 5th grade and stuff. There would always be like some console set up and you would take turns playing. And I used to love playing like Super Mario 64 and stuff. But I didn't really know, like I thought, as many kids think, like I thought that video games just like pooped out of thin air. Like I didn't know that people actually made them. Like I didn't know that was a job. And so I didn't even consider video game development as a career until much later in life. I had gotten my associate's degree in Virginia where I grew up, and it was an associate's of fine arts. And I was like, well, where do I go from here? And I was like, well, maybe I'll just move across the country and go to art school and see what happens. And that's kind of how I like discovered video games as a concept. Like I was going to be an art teacher, and I was just kind of like, I had done traditional art for so long, my entire life. Like I was drawing and painting and all this stuff. And I was kind of like, do I really want to do this forever now? Like I'm kind of tired of it.
Right.
And so I like took a couple of tours of the academy to see like some of the different majors that were an option for me. And that's when I like discovered video games could be a thing. And I was like, oh yeah, this looks really cool. I'm going all in on this.
Great. Awesome. And Maddie, what about yourself? Like, what was your childhood like with video games? What got you inspired or started on this path?
Yeah, so it was really funny. When I was a kid, like between, up until about age 8 or so, my parents, particularly my mom, were super against video games. They're like, it's right in your brain. You have to keep playing outside. And we did plenty of that, skateboarding, dirt bike ramps, like all that type of stuff. And I had this friend in the neighborhood who we knew since I was about 3. His mom didn't care. She got him the Xbox, the PlayStation, whatever. So at age 5, we were over there. We would sneak over and play Halo and Hitman and all of the games we weren't supposed to be playing at that age. This went on for years and years until my parents finally kind of just let us, they finally got us a GameCube. And so playing video games is always a big part of my life. But I never, again, the same thing. I didn't think you could actually have a career in it. When I was like 3 years old, I knew I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to have a career in art. That was my life goal. So, most kids kind of vacillate between different career choices when they grow up. For me, it was very consistent, just artist, literally all the way through. I didn't know exactly what. When I was in high school, I started to think, okay, entertainment, because around that time, my parents were like, are you gonna change course here? Because the whole starving artist type of thing. And so the Academy of Art University actually has a summer program for high school students where you can go to the university over the summer and take a variety of courses designed specifically for high school students. So you get a feel for the school. So I did that when I was about 17. And I spent the summer in San Francisco, and I took a course for animation. I took a course for like illustration, and I took a course that was called video game art or something like that. And I hated the animation course. And that's kind of like the road I was thinking myself, okay, I want to work for Pixar or something. Hated it. I absolutely hated animating in Maya. But this video game art course, it was essentially just digital sculpting in ZBrush. And so if you're a 3D artist, you know, it's very similar to sculpting in real life, except it's just digitally. And, you know, being a traditional artist, that really resonated with me. I was able to quickly pick it up and was like, oh, if this is what making art for video games is, then okay, I'll do it, fine. And that's how I more or less ended up at the school. So lots of happy accidents.
No, that's great. I want to go next on to some more details about what you actually do on a day-to-day basis as far as the jobs you have. And I thought I'd start with Danielle and Krista first, since you're both tech artists, and I thought it might be interesting. You might have sort of a different perspective on what you do, but let's start with Danielle. Like, a lot of people don't really know what a tech artist is. And in the past, I've sort of described it to classes as a combination of art and programming, like sort of tools type things, maybe support for animation rigs and stuff like that. Can you give me an idea of what you do currently as a tech artist and maybe some of your past experience?
Yeah, tech art is definitely a broad field. There are lots of different kinds of tech artists, and there are even, you know, plenty of ways that you can specialize within tech art. You know, character technical art with animation and rigging. You can do environment technical art as well. Focus more on shaders. I myself have focused mostly. You know, I'm pretty broad, pretty generalist. But my focus has mostly been on pipeline development. So generally over my career, that has meant taking a very large amount of assets, thousands and thousands of models with all of their associated metadata. So everything that you need to know about a specific object that's going to be in a game or a simulation, and making sure that it is a smooth pipeline from one end to the next, because there's usually lots of different things that need to be done to the models and all of the associated bits and pieces that go along with them, all of the animation files and all of the rig that may be attached to it, and then the materials and the textures. There's just lots of itty bitty pieces that need to be linked together. So just like you said, it's sort of a cross between art, because you need to know what it should look like, but you also need a lot of power behind it, where the coding comes in, because especially when you're dealing with that much volume, you really need to be able to script through it. It's just not feasible to do all of that by hand. So as a tech...
No, please go ahead.
As a tech artist, I usually think of myself sort of as a translator, interpreter between the art team and the engineering team, and trying to make sure that all of that works smoothly together, and using the strengths of each team to really bring it all together and let everyone shine.
So before I move on to Krista, what I was going to ask is, what is your workflow like? Like, what sort of tools are you using? Are you developing tools? Like, what's the workflow like?
Yeah, right now I am developing an asset library. So that means this year I've gotten to dig into Blender, actually. And so building tools in that means scripting in Python, making interfaces. A really common tech art one is the export button. So for whatever context these assets may be going into, you'll have a bunch of artists making a bunch of stuff, and they would really, really like to just push the one button to do all of the things that it takes to get it into the engine. So we usually make that button.
Yeah, we always joke that producers want that button, but their button is labeled "Make the Game" button.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good old industry joke. Krista, how about you? How does that experience jive with what you do?
Yeah, I actually have a pretty similar experience. As a tech artist, I mostly focus on, well, I'm not quite as heavy into the pipeline stuff. I'm actually more, I do some rigging, and I also do some tools development. And I've also worked a lot on dynamics at my company, but I prefer more like the rigging and tools development. There's nothing that makes me happier than creating a really excellent user interface with Python and Qt. Like, I love that kind of stuff. And really digging into like what is going to help an artist and doing like shoulder surfing and understanding people's workflows and finding all of the glorious ways that artists seem to break your tools. Like, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then with character rigging, you know, like NBA 2K is like a hyper realistic game, so we're always working on like cool new ways to rig up human bodies, you know, and so that's a really interesting challenge.
Cool. I mean, I think the two PS5 games that I'm most excited about right now are the Demon Souls remaster and NBA 2K.
Nice.
Like, both
Yeah.
of those games look fantastic. So cool. Let's go on to Maddie. So we talked a little bit about how you went on from props to environments, but you know, what is your workflow like? What are some of the tools you have to use?
So it's interesting. I do a lot of different things. Sometimes I'm world building, which is essentially like an engine. I'm taking a bunch of props or assets that we already have made and I'm placing them around. You know, you're building the world. So I'm going to place this tree here with this rock here and this vegetation or this table, this chair. Sometimes I am developing kits, particularly modular kits, because when you're an environment artist, you need to be able to develop a kit, which is a bunch of different pieces, but when they all work together, you can use them over and over and over again. Recently, actually, I just spent the last 2 weeks developing a 35-piece foliage kit. And foliage is actually something that I'm really passionate about. It's one of my favorite things. I'm a huge nature person. And I definitely have a lot of fun with that. I'm trying to think what else. You know, as an environment artist, one of the things you definitely learn once you get out of the school environment, especially if you really don't take advantage of the collab classes, is with artists, it's really easy for us to sit there in our bubble and then just make our asset. You know, it's in the void. Okay, here's my little sword that I'm making, but it suddenly has completely different context when you put it in a game that a bunch of different people are working on. So for example, if I'm making a modular environment kit, say it's like a building, I have to work with designers to make sure that collision is right, or it's not creating any weird clipping issues, that it can snap together in the ways that they want it to. I also have to work with art direction to make sure I'm meeting the silhouettes, meeting the color profile, all of that stuff. So you, as an environment artist, you definitely do a lot of back and forth communication. And that's really important, that you have those soft skills. You have to be pretty proactive about that. And tech artists too, we talk with tech artists for sure, because yeah, we do break their tools. But that export button, God bless, that is the most useful thing ever. That's for sure. That's kind of like some of the daily stuff I do.
I mean, to what you say, a lot of people, especially a lot of students I run into, don't seem to understand just how closely you have to work with other disciplines.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you're off in the corner just making art with no direction from anybody and it goes into the game. Like, it's a process it goes through. And that's definitely, I got a question about that a little later on that I'd like to ask you all about. So we'll circle back on that one later. Tools you use, I'm assuming like Maya, Blender.
Oh yeah,
like...
tools. Yeah, the tools we primarily use is Maya, ZBrush, Substance Painter, and Substance Designer. Yeah, those are the core. I personally like to use Marmoset Toolbag for baking purposes. I like it a little better than Substance, but not everyone uses that. Some people also use Blender. Some people, more kind of our techie people, use Houdini as well. So kind of like most of the industry standard stuff that you see out there.
Good. I think it's nice, like a lot of the artists I've worked with in the past, it's nice that a lot of companies support the flexibility in tools that they allow artists to use. Like there's a certain amount of leeway in what, other companies, like smaller companies I've worked at, you don't get that decision. You use this one thing and that's it. So it's
Right.
nice to hear that you have a variety of tools to work with. Cool. And Kat, can you describe your current job a little bit more? You're the
Yeah.
one with the most words in your job title.
Yeah, so associate content game designer is a fancy way of saying associate level designer.
So, a lot of people get confused over what level design is when it's not like a AAA third-person character jumping around. Like, how do you define level design when it comes to like a match 3 game or something like that?
Level design in that game would be how the board's laid out, how you want the goal of the game, or how you set up the goals of the game, how hard is it supposed to be, how to there's a lot to it actually. Surprisingly, that's what blew my mind when I did a design test. I was like, oh my god, I didn't even think about how you could design for boards like this. So there's a lot more to it than you think, where it's like how you want the flow of the game to go, because you can control those goals and stuff and how things open up on the board. You can make them really constricted. You can have this many amount of colors on the board, open it up later on, and things like that. It's actually pretty fun.
Okay. And your current job, like, are you working with a group of designers? Are you working in a pod with artists, programmers? How does that work?
I work very closely with my design team. It's about like 10 extra people. And
Wow, that's a big design team.
Yeah, I do talk to, well, actually, I don't really talk to Art too much. It's still about 2 months in. And we talk a lot to QA because we're working on migrating something over. And it's like we have to catch stuff because as the designers, we need to know the game in and out and need to catch things that aren't working. So we tell them like, hey, this looks like that. Or, hey, there's a bug here with the score constantly.
Right. And what's your workflow like? What sort of tools are you using? Are they proprietary tools or are you using something that's pretty common? You can't say, that's fine.
No, I can. I'm actually working in Flash, surprisingly, like the web browser, like Adobe Flash. That's where our editor is, and it's a editor unique to the studio. So we work in there to make the match 3 boards. And right now, which I can't talk about, we're actually migrating it to Unity because if anyone's been paying attention to just online lately, Flash is going to go out by the end of this year. So we're migrating as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think I just got a Windows update that notified me that Flash was now gone. It was kind of sad.
Yeah, after a really long time. So we're currently working with QA to make sure the next editor is looking better. And as far as I'm concerned, my day-to-day.
Okay, cool. All right. The next thing I would like to talk about is how you got your first job in the industry. Like, what was the interview process like? Like, what was sort of that break? And we can just keep going with Kat right here. How did you, when you graduated, what was the process of looking for a job and getting a job? And do you think that you got one specific break that caused it all to happen?
Yes. So I graduated at the end of 2018, and I was looking for a job for about a month, actually. I was sending my application everywhere I could find that would be willing to accept a new person who's completely fresh. And it's just really, to all the students, cast a net, do it. Cast a net to any company you find that you're oh my God, I could do that job. Just saying, you really want to go out there and just send out your application. Someone will get back to you.
Yeah,
and luckily for me,
I always tell everybody, you got to hustle, right? You can't have your eyes fixated on one company you're going to work for. You got to knock on a lot of doors.
Yeah,
so what doors were open for you then to get this to happen?
Luckily for me, if anyone remembers Via, she actually reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for people who are good at Unity. And I know you, I want to recommend you. You want to work for us? And I went, yes, please. I will take anything.
And what was that interview process like when you went to Unity?
Yeah, so this job was for Fog Bank Entertainment, which was under Fox Next Games, one of the 3 studios. And luckily I didn't have to do a design test. Via kept vouching for me. She's good at Unity, she learns it. I've worked with her, sweet.
So her job was on the line if you weren't successful.
Yeah.
All right, got it. All right, keep going.
Yeah, so the initial interview process was talking to, I think I had an extra step compared to everyone else, but I talked to HR first because they were the ones, or the recruiter first, because they need to know if I just fit the qualifications. So we talked for about 15 to 30 minutes. And they're like, okay, we'll get back to you. And then, after a bit, one of the producers from the studio calls me so she can get a feel for me before I would talk to, I think, one of the directors at the studio. So I talked to her, and funnily enough, we ended up kind of going off talking about movies and games. Like, I was like, man, yeah, I really like Guardians of the Galaxy. She's like, oh my God, I love that movie. So I knew I was in a good spot.
Nice. I mean,
Getting
that's something I
along.
tell everybody is anytime you interview, you know, if you can find that sort of like one thing that you have in common with the person you're interviewing, it can be a huge deal. I remember at Namco, the woman I was interviewing with had photos of cats all over her office that you couldn't miss. So I started talking about cats, and I'm pretty sure that's why I got the job. So cool.
Oh,
Good. So your interview process beyond that, like what happened when you started talking to other people on the team? Was there like a third sort of part of the process here?
yeah. This is where you do a group interview. Surprisingly, I wasn't expecting to get that on my first job, where you have more than 10 people talk to you at different slots. So I flew to San Francisco because I was back home in LA. So I flew up there for that day to take my interview, and it was a 3-hour interview with about 2 to 3 people per half hour. So I was talking about like 12 or so people for those like 2 3 hours.
Were you stressed out?
Yeah. But I got through it. I was like, just talk, like, you know what's on your resume, just answer the questions, you know, look them in the eye, or look at the bridge of their nose, because that works if you're nervous about looking them in the eye. And
I always look over people's heads. I think that's
Oh.
a good, because it looks like you're looking at them. Did they all ask you like the same sorts of questions?
Yeah, like they asked me a few things like, where'd you learn Unity, or you did these projects at school, like how did that go, describe your process. And sometimes they would ask like, did you have any issues at school, because it looks like you did a collab project, do you have any like bad stories to share, which was interesting because like you don't really want to bad talk anyone that you know, especially like even at school. You don't know where they're going to be later on in the industry, assuming you all make it to the industry. Like everyone goes in, no one leaves or anything like that. Bad talking someone now could ruin you getting a job in the future. So be nice to everyone, okay?
Oh, I would totally agree with that. And that's kind of a trick question. Even when you've been in the industry a while, they'll say like, hey, what did you hate about your last job? They'll ask a question like that. And it's not so much they want you to give a specific answer. They just want to see how you answer. I think is what the key is there. So yeah, that's a trick question.
Yeah.
And then how long did it take for them to say like, would you like to come work for us?
I think a week or so. Like, I think they were like, yeah, we want her. I forget if I was going up against other people at that time, but I might have been like, they want me.
And how did you feel? Were you like, oh my gosh, are they going to call? Are they going to call? Or
yeah, I was like, oh my God, I really hope I got the job. I got to the last interview. It has to be something like, oh my God, please. Because I've had a lot of rejections like up to that point. And so please, I need the job.
And when you got the job, you like, yes, I've made it.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, my foot's in the door. That's perfect. And I get to work with some people I knew.
That's great. You also work with some people I knew. So that was that was, we'll talk some more about this job a little later on, but I think like you almost had the perfect first job experience because it covered a lot of ground.
Yes.
In a short amount of time. So we'll come back on that a little bit later. Maddie, what was your interview process like?
So what's really funny about how I ended up where I am is I didn't actually specifically apply to them. They actually called me. Yeah. I was actually still at my parents' house over the holidays visiting. And I got an email from one of the recruiters saying, oh, hey, your resume was passed along. I'd like to do a phone interview with you. So I was like, okay, get my siblings all out of the house. Like, I need to have this phone call. It's super important. And the phone call lasted maybe about 45 minutes. And it went really well. And then she emailed me, I don't know, a day or two later and said that the art director wanted to meet me in person. And so this was going to be like an in-person interview. And so luckily, the timing was perfect because I was just coming back to the Bay Area after visiting my family. So I had to rush, rent a car, and have my plan to drive out to the studio. And that interview was a group interview. I met with the senior producer, with the art director, with the director of culture, and the senior environment artist. And they kind of broke it up into like 2 separate parts. So I met with the the producer and director of culture first, and then art director, and then environment artist after. And everything I had on my resume was pretty straightforward. So they were, at that point, it was more of like a personal interview, just trying to get to know me as a person. When I was with the art director and the senior environment artist, we were looking at my portfolio, and that was mostly centered around, which piece of all of these are you kind of like most proud of? We can take a look at it. What could you do to change this? Which is essentially just asking how you feel about your own art, and I felt like that went really well. It was maybe about 90 minutes or so. And this is the really funny thing about this whole ordeal. I have a buddy over at Sledgehammer Games. And so we went and got lunch after my interview. And after we were done, I happened to look at my phone and I had a missed call from that recruiter. And this was maybe about 15, 20 minutes after I had left. And so I listened to the message and they wanted to hire me. And so, yeah. So I called her back and I was like, so you said what? And she was like, yeah, I know it's already only 15 minutes after you left, but you want to join us? And I was like, okay, sure. So it was a extremely lucky break. I thought, again, I didn't even apply to them. They came to me. I just felt super, super, super lucky. But it all worked out, and I started working with them 2 weeks later.
That's fantastic. I mean, that 20 minutes from like end of interview to like offer, that's crazy. Like I always think of like, it's almost like that dating rule. You're not supposed to call somebody back for a week or something like that. So that's pretty incredible. That's almost like getting hired on the spot, which is something I still haven't gotten, but that's pretty damn close. That's incredible. Cool. Were you nervous during your interview?
Maybe a little bit, but I've kind of gotten over those interview jitters. It's art and it's my lifelong passion, and I have no issues talking about my passions. I tend to, approach interviews kind of like with public speaking, where if it's something I really like and that I'm passionate about, and I'm talking about me as a person, I know who I am, I'm comfortable doing that. So yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I felt like it was okay.
Yeah, you bring up something interesting that a lot of the time when you get interviewed at a company, it's not just for your skills and portfolio, but it's for your fit with the company. They're interviewing your personality. Right. Like, what's your thought process? What's your creative process? What's your workflow? Like, those are all things that are unique to people. So a lot of the time it's like, do you have the skills? Yes. But do you have the personality? That's something they're also looking for. So that's interesting you brought that up. Let's go with Danielle next. Danielle, you have an interesting resume, a lot of things that I personally like. Kixeye is an interesting one. I once got turned down for a job at Kixeye that I never applied for. So that's kind of like the opposite of Maddie's story there. But you have like Forza on there and Wizards of the Coast, two things I love a lot. So what was your first interview like in the game industry? Like, how did it happen for you?
The first few gigs I had while I was still there in San Francisco, there was no interview. I did a lot of contract work. So meeting people at the Academy and just being in San Francisco itself. I spent a lot of time at GDC and at Unite, just talking to other people who were making games at the time. And so that was the way that I got to hear about lots of problems that people had that needed solving. And that's my favorite thing. So I must have had like 4 or 5 contract gigs during that time. That was just like, we have this batch of assets and we can't, like when we bring it into Unity, the head is over there and the arm is over there, and someone please just make this better for us. And I was like, oh, pick me. And oftentimes it was only, a couple months where they needed that work. But there were a few of them. And one of the early ones, just before Kixeye, I found a company called Nuco Toys that was making a card game. So this was sort of foreshadowing my time with Wizards of the Coast working on Magic. It was a really cool concept. They had these cards that interacted with an iPad. So it was like an actual physical trading card. and it had little pieces of metal in there that would it was a very specific pattern that it would hit on the iPad screen. And so they had a game that would go along with the trading card game. So you had Animal Planet was one of their IPs. So there was this Animal Planet strategy game, and you could, you're a 10-year-old kid, you're super excited about animals, and you're collecting the cheetah and the rhinoceros, and then you can go into the game and tap the card, and it like jumps into the world. I think I found out about them because they were also at Unite and GDC, and I was like, this is amazing. Games for education is one of the things that I've always been super passionate about. So I dogged them for months. I just showed up on their doorstep, just like, hey, what you guys doing now? Do you need any tech art? I had a couple of lunches with Mike North, was one of my favorite people there. He travels a lot and did a bunch of like Discovery Channel shows. Super cool dude, invented like a correctional device for kids with like a disorder where their legs bend. Anyway, had really good conversations with him, and eventually they did need something, I remember rendering out a giant poster board for a conference. It was like a Cyclops. Monsterology was one of their other IPs. So my little school laptop spent 11 hours on that.
Jeez, that is nuts. Just for one image?
Yeah, that was just for the one printout because it was, I don't know, 1800 DPI or whatever.
I think people these days are spoiled in the concept of rendering. They don't quite understand how long it used to take.
Yeah, and thank goodness it doesn't anymore most times.
That's interesting. So perseverance really paid off with that one, right? And, you talk about like the Unite event. How important do you think networking is? I mean, there's an obvious answer to that, but how important was it for you?
Extremely. And it was tough because I'm a super shy person just in general. I don't spend a whole lot of time going out of my way to make small talk with people. But there are a lot of interesting people out there, especially in places like San Francisco, doing some really interesting projects, and they have some really interesting problems that they want to solve and things that they care about. And so that was always a good way for me to bond with people.
Cool. Well, thank you for making small talk with me this evening. So
this is a good small talk event.
Okay, good. Krista, you're up next. So, what was your first break? How did that happen, and how was that process?
Yeah, I think I consider my first big games job to be visual concepts and like 2K and stuff like that. But I guess beforehand, something that was really cool that happened was I got to do a stint at Unity, where I was kind of halfway between like an intern and like, an associate producer or whatever.
Okay.
So I guess you could say that was kind of like a break for me. Like having Unity on my resume looked pretty cool. And like the way that happened was totally random. Like Phil Koffold, he like invited me to a focus group, I think, because I was using Unity a ton at school. And Unity like wanted to know about how like education and Unity were like combined and all that stuff, and how students were using Unity and stuff like that. And so I showed up for this focus group, and I was, really active in the conversation and bringing up points and asking questions and stuff like that. And the director of the education department, we went on like a tour afterwards, and she just kind of walked up to me and was like, do you want to like have an internship here? I was like, hell yeah, I do. And so, but like she was also the director, so she like gave me her email, and I like kind of was like talking with her, but she was like a super busy person, so I just kind of had to like keep emailing her to like get her to like actually like make me an actual offer or whatever. So that was like a very nerve-wracking process, because it was like I kind of had to take the reins, and I wasn't feeling super confident about it, but I feel like I kept talking to Phil about it, and he just kept being like, yeah, just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy though. You were offered a job on the spot. So
yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was like
dream then.
Yeah, it was pretty low stakes because it was like basically an internship, but I mean, it definitely, got me to some cool places. Like I worked on the education team, so I wasn't a dev at all, but I worked on the education team, and I helped them to develop the technical art professional certification for Unity. And that was a really cool process. I met a lot of technical artists actually, because I was one of the people who was recruiting the tech artists to kind of help develop the questions for the certification and stuff like that. So I met some cool people from all over the world. And we all got to like hang out in a room and like write test questions together.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But like, as far as like a more high stakes interview, like my interview with 2K and like visual concepts and stuff like that, that was definitely different. I met the art director for NBA 2K at Spring Show.
Okay.
And he was there like looking at some of the rigging stuff, and visual concepts was like in crunch, and they really needed like somebody to work on like a contract basis to help with a lot of the rigging, because they just had like a high volume of assets that needed like skin weights and rigging and stuff like that really fast. So I think they were kind of like trying to fast track it. And so I met the art director, Joel Frisch, and I actually had like a really awkward encounter with him because I was really nervous.
Oh no, what happened?
Like, I was just being super awkward. You know, I was like, oh, how's it going? You know, like I was just being really weird. And, you know, after the interaction, like, I couldn't get my demo reel to play because the Wi-Fi sucked. And like, it was just horrible. I just gave him my card and I was like, my demo reel's on the website, like, just check it out, you know, and I just like kind of walked away in shame. But then, you know, I wrote that off as like this horrible interaction, you know, and then at 5 o'clock that day, like I got a call to set up an interview. So like, despite my kind of, you know, the way that I portrayed that interaction, like they needed someone and I was someone. So
right.
Yeah.
I guess unless you do something really horrible during an interview, like offend somebody or something, like you really never really know how it's going to turn out, right?
Totally. I was just a little awkward bean, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah. And something I'm hearing from everybody, which is really cool that we need to stress to everybody listening and watching tonight, is that opportunity is like a really big deal. Like you should take every opportunity that comes your way. You never know where it's going to end up, right? And also developing those relationships with like your instructors and your peers and everybody else, like that is all crucial to getting anywhere in this industry. So it's good to hear that echoed from everybody else. So let's stick with you, Krista, for the next question. This is a good one. What was the transition like from being a student to actually working in the industry? Was it like total like culture shock, or what was that like?
Yeah, I actually love this question because it was really, really hard for me. Like even at Unity, like I was doing kind of project management and stuff like that, and that came pretty naturally to me. And it's not as, you know, technical as being like a technical artist, you know, which was like my ultimate goal. Like I knew I didn't want to be a producer necessarily right out of the gate. So like school, I had been in school for so long. School was like my domain. Like I felt on top of the world by the time it was like senior year or whatever. And I was almost graduating. I was like, I got what I needed from this place. I know all I need to know. Like I'm awesome. Like this is going to be a breeze. Like that's kind of where I was at the end of school. And I thought I knew everything, you know, and then jumping into this environment that was just like completely different, like, you know, figuring out a proprietary engine, you know, putting myself into a pipeline that has existed for longer than I've been around. Like Visual Concepts Entertainment has existed as a company for longer than I have lived. So like wedging yourself into a pipeline that has existed for so long, like you don't get to just like start everything from scratch all the time. Like everything is not just like this new fresh project that you get to build from the ground up. Like you have to learn how to integrate yourself into this huge system that already exists, because it's not going to like reinvent itself for you. So it was a huge struggle for me. Like my first year at 2K, like it felt like I knew nothing, and I was always like struggling and like I was like, how was I not prepared for this?
Right. Did you ask a
but-
lot of questions? Did you ask for help a lot?
Oh God, yeah. Like I was constantly asking questions. I felt bad for how many questions I was asking, but like eventually I had to like figure out that it's not just me at a new job who has to ask all these questions. Like everybody has to figure out this kind of stuff. But like really learning how to hone the skills of like, especially when it comes to code, like learning to read other people's code rather than just saying, oh, I'll just rewrite this my own way, you know, like
Right.
learning to adapt to that kind of a workflow was difficult, but it was like a really, really valuable skill.
Yeah, that's great that you mentioned that. I mean, numerous times I've had like a level handed off to me with a script that is not my own. And it's like, no, I can't really just redo this from scratch the way I want to do this because
Right.
people are depending on me to get something done by a certain time. It costs a certain amount of money. Like there are responsibilities. You're no longer working by yourself. You're part of a team that's requiring you to do certain things a certain way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good to hear that. Maddie, what was your transition like from being a student to working in the industry? Were you like, oh my gosh, this is exactly like I thought it was going to be, or was it something crazy and unexpected?
So maybe a little of both. The time that I was in between graduating and then starting to work was actually very difficult, more or less, for me. I love being in the school environment. I love learning. It's a very natural thing. I really enjoyed being in school. Kind of the same thing that Krista had said, that, you know, by the time I got out of there, I'm like, I am ready to get a job, to finally get paid for doing the things that I love. But I had some personal things that happened, which, you know, life throws things at you. I had to go take care of my grandparents for a while. And then I had a health emergency where I was hospitalized for like 4 days, and then I was recovering for about 2 months. And that really throws a wrench into your job searching plans. And yeah, that was, you know, and this was kind of in the fall, and I know jobs are slowing down at this point, and I won't be able to get anything probably until the spring. But I kind of told myself, well, why would you give up now after all this, after all of the money that you've spent to get to this point? And when I finally got the job, and I finally started working, it was like, I hate to sound so cliche, but it's literally a dream come true. Okay, I am doing what I love. And because going to art school was also a dream come true. Like, you mean I get to do homework and it's art? Like, dude. And now it's like, you mean I get to work and it's art and I get paid for it? Like, dude. So definitely once I kind of started working, I was happier than I ever had been. And I had, you know, I was doing some collaborative stuff before. So kind of transitioning into that team environment wasn't really a huge culture shock to me. One of the things that a lot of artists struggle with, especially when they first get into the industry, is being personally attached to their work. You know, an art director says, okay, that's pretty, but it's not what we need. Or a designer says, yeah, that's cool, but it's not conducive with gameplay. And you have to be okay with saying, okay, what do you need? What do I need to do to fix it? You know, my personal work that I do in my own time, okay, I personally attach myself to that because it's my personal work. But at work, it's work for a greater cause. Everyone is working towards the same thing. So you have to be okay with adapting and taking criticism and being able to pivot really fast.
Right. I mean, you have a client now. You basically have a client who is paying you to do something. And it's funny, the person who I don't like very much in the game industry, like somebody who I'm like, oh, you're a jerk or whatever, right? But they gave me the most valuable piece of advice I've ever gotten, which echoes what you said. And that is never get too attached to one thing.
Right.
I may have that idea and I'll be damned if anyone's going to tell me I'm not going to get it in this game, and I'll try. But I think you end up losing that when you're in a professional environment and you see that everybody has not necessarily sacrifices, but everybody has to make compromise in order to make these things work.
Right.
So,
Exactly. And I think the most important thing to remember is, you know, are you doing this for yourself, or are you doing this because you want to work on a team project and make something really
Right.
cool together? This is not an individualistic thing. This is a communal thing.
absolutely. So Kat, did I teach you, or did all the design department teach you everything you needed to know to be a designer, or do we miss out on anything?
No, I think I got it.
Okay, good.
Did pretty well going out.
Good.
Which
So
is
like,
good.
again, like what was the process like being like having a job finally? Was it different than what you expected? You know, did a lot of the lessons you learned in school carry over?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just typically a generally nervous person. So if I'm actually, this kind of brings up imposter syndrome. I think I do have it. I don't know how severe, but if any students have seen that, it happens to everybody who's in an artistic field, and it's okay to feel it. Just don't beat yourself up too hard over it. It's okay. You're doing well. You're doing well, sweethearts. So I'm not the most confident person sometimes when it comes to me going out. I was just happy to be out of college. I was like, oh my God, like I got through all of school. I did it. Now I had to go get a job. Can I handle getting a job fresh out of school? I've been a student all my life. Oh no. And you guys have always told me industry jobs are going to be so much different from school. Even if I have a collab class, it's not going to be remotely close to what you do in the industry. So I had to keep that in mind going in. Like, I'm not going to, I don't know what I'm going to walk into. And also, this is going to touch on a topic I think I know is coming up later, but like hearing some like horror stories of the industry sometimes, like, oh my God, like what if there's like, you know, sexual harassment issues or something like that? What if I'm walking to a studio where I don't know that's going on, or it's a toxic workplace? Like that's something to think about. You don't know that going in unless it's like, you know, the studio is well known for that, unfortunately. But you never know. Like there's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors. So I was pretty nervous just like getting out there and into the world. But once I got my first job, it didn't take me too long to be like, oh my God, this is like my new family. Like I love working with these people. Like I trust them so much, and I could just talk to them about anything. Like I sit next to, like Weezy, you know, Jake. I sat next to him all the time. We would talk about so much Star Wars all the time.
That's great. Yeah,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, that's interesting. And I wanted to, we had a question here that I think would apply to you. Was Jam City a virtual interview? Was it like a Zoom interview?
Yeah, it was, because it happened this year because of the pandemic.
So how different was that from like an in-person interview? Did you feel it was a disadvantage, an advantage, or it didn't matter?
I kind of was still having the same like reservations. I was like, oh no, it's another group interview, but it's a Zoom, so that should be interesting. Like I don't have to kind of keep turning to everyone. At least like I could just look down at the screen. I don't have to look people dead in the eyes, luckily. So that was a little bit easier on me. But yeah, it was kind of the same thing. It felt like the same way. Like group interview, you're talking to different disciplines. They want to get a feel for you, see if they want you here. And then you gotta be able to explain some design questions they ask you, like, how do you feel about this? Or what was running through your mind? So it wasn't too different. It was just, if anything, was slightly easier.
Okay, good to hear.
Just slightly.
All right, and Danielle, with your wealth of experience, you know, again, I'm looking at like Wizards of the Coast and working at Microsoft on Forza, which is one of my favorite racing games. Like, how about like, what was your process like of transition from being in school to like, now I'm out in the job force and I'm having to make a career out of this? Like, do you feel you were well prepared?
Well prepared. I was chomping at the bit the entire time I was at the academy, and even before that. Like I mentioned, those contract jobs were while I was still in school. So by the time I got to Kixeye, which was my first sort of real full-time job where I got to sit down in a single place and do a single job, and that was it. That was all I was worrying about. That was kind of a nice breather compared to, you know, the earlier trying to get all of the different contract gigs. And as that has evolved from Kixeye on to Turn 10, where I was working on Forza, I think that has continued to mature as far as working on larger and larger projects. And I think both Krista, especially, you were talking about the jumping into a legacy environment is much different than it is when you're in school. You get to start a lot of things fresh, especially on indie projects. you get to bring it all up from scratch, and that's really exciting and fun, and rapid prototyping is really engaging. But working in a proprietary engine on legacy things, it takes a lot more attention span, I think. And you really have to be prepared to sit down and over the next several months, not like hours, but months, learn how to use this specific part, this specific tool within the engine, and then make one tiny tweak. Like one of the things I did while I was at Turn 10 was add a color overlay that allowed the environment artists to visualize. For their tracks, they have a process that goes around and optimizes all of the models based on the camera angle. So this camera will run down the center of the track, and it will analyze from several different points what takes up the most screen space. And it hacks away at the environment artists' models, which is really rough for them. You know, they've worked really hard on these things. I'm sure, Maddie, you can attest. You sort of put a little bit of your soul into each one of these, you know, like the wacky waving tube men that are in Forza. But, you know, Rio is one of the tracks there, and it's this gorgeous favela hillside, and all of the buildings are modeled down to the little balcony and the plants on it. And then this tool runs through and just hacks it down because we need it to be 10 polys because it's only this big on screen. And the environment artist had no way to know how this was going to happen. And so I spent, yeah, like I said, months just going in and putting a color overlay, sort of heat map sort of thing, saying this thing is going to be optimized the heaviest, and this thing is going to stay at roughly its same resolution. So you know what you're getting out of it as an environment artist. Whereas in a fresh environment, I would expect that to take maybe a couple days.
Right. For everyone who doesn't know, proprietary means that it's technology that that company has come up with that no other company has. That's like the rough definition of it, compared to something like Unity or Unreal, which are professional tools that you find all over the place. And I think to Danielle's point, sometimes, you know, you mentioned legacy, which means you're mentioning a lot of time that has been invested in those tools by a lot of people. And sometimes those people aren't around anymore. So it's almost like you're getting lore around a campfire, trying to figure out how something works. So it has its own
that tribal knowledge.
What's that?
That tribal knowledge passed down from
it's handed down
generation to the next.
So yeah, those tool sets can be definitely very crazy to work with. So let me go on to Krista here. This is a question I like to ask a lot. I'll preface it by saying, when I was in the game industry, when I first started, it was very white and very male. Like I worked in companies where there were no women's bathrooms because there weren't any women working at the company, right? And that, you know, at the very beginning of my career, I didn't think too much of it. As I went along in my career, I definitely noticed that something was definitely wrong by not having a lot more diversity in the workforce. So let me start with you, Krista. How do you feel at your current job? Are there opportunities for does your company embrace diversity, gender equality? Are there opportunities for everybody? What's it like being in that environment as a woman?
Yeah, I was kind of prepared for the worst. Like, you know, having industry vets as teachers, they tell you like what to expect. And yeah, I imagine back then, like it was way worse than it is now. Luckily, like I don't have a big problem at my company with as far as like sexual harassment or anything like that. And I do think my team especially is like pretty diverse, which is really cool. Like we've got people from a bunch of different backgrounds. We have a lot of people from like overseas, and we just got our second female tech artist, which is incredible. I was the only one for so long, and it feels so amazing to have another woman on the team. But yeah, I mean, the industry is still really undiverse. You know, that's just a fact. Like there's not really like a this way or that about it. And it's also not something that can be solved by like a workshop one day at your office. You know, encouraging diversity takes continued investment in like hiring programs, supporting scholarships, mentorship initiatives, which I'm really a big fan of, a willingness to support people who have been systematically kind of blocked from this industry and the system, like it takes that support and like being able to like build those people up to get more equity.
Right. It's kind of weird because the video game industry is a generally young industry in many ways. You know, it started back in the 70s, but until around the 90s, the version we're in right now didn't exist. So it's a very young industry still.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I hear things about, you know, we need more diversity and everything like that. But I also know that we've got like 30 years of entrenched sort of ways of doing things right now that need to be broken. And unfortunately, they take time.
Yeah.
You know, that's the awful thing. I wish I had, you know, we're talking about the one magic button that we all want in a tool set. I want that one that advances time to a different looking workplace, something that has that diversity and everything in it. So
yeah,
I don't know whether you agree with me. I think we're sort of in a transition phase right now. Like I see something happening, but still not quite enough.
I would agree with that. Like you know, it's always been something I'm super passionate about, being a woman and being an Indigenous person. Like it's really always been something that I've been super interested in. And like, I feel like at some companies, it's easier than others to kind of like get the conversation going. Like when I was at Unity, I actually was on a small team of people who just kind of like self-started, and we created like diversity initiatives at Unity, and it was really, really cool. It was a group of like 4 women and one guy like jumped in, this like white guy. He was like, I want to be an ally. I was like, dude, yes, you're awesome. But yeah, we like started making a program plan and that kind of thing. And that just felt like super cool that I could just start that up there. But like, you know, in bigger companies that are more corporate, things are a little bit more difficult, and like you have to go through a lot of red tape, and it can feel really hard to like keep going, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of these big companies seem like they're more reactive than proactive. Like if something happens that makes them look bad, oh, we got a statement for that. Let's get this thing going. Like
put it on social media, like
yeah, and it's like if you've been listening, you would have heard about this a lot sooner and gotten out in front of it. So,
right.
Interesting. I'll ask you all the same question because I think this is really important, you know, for different experiences. Like Maddie, how about at your workplace? Like, do you feel there is a decent amount of diversity, opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I first want to preface that with saying everything could always be better. With a topic like this, there is no end goal. Like we could always improve, we can always be better, and we should always strive for that. At my studio, actually one of our core values is specifically calling out diversity and representation, both in our studio and in the project that we're working on. It's really important to us. That being said, I'm the only non-male on the environment team. So, you know, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But I really do appreciate everyone, especially in the higher up positions, but particularly in recruiting, they do go out of their way to make sure that they are interviewing a diverse, you know, group of voices, and, you know, not only, you know, based on specific characteristics, but also people from movies, you know, people from like illustration, what have you, because those people also provide a very different perspective, you know, even if they've never worked in games before. We also we do this really fun thing actually where we have like this happy brain hour thing where, you know, it's okay, we have an hour dedicated to a particular subject, and okay, we're focusing on diversity and representation this month or whatever, and we'll bring in people to talk about a particular subject from a, you know, from tech, from environment work, not like literally environment art, but like the actual environment. And that also really helps us with, you know, inspiration, getting ideas for the project that we're working on. One of my producers actually reached out to this program over here in Oakland called Game Heads, and they're all about giving students from low income and who are people of color opportunities to get into the game industry, you know, to learn the tech, see if this is something that they want to do. They work on projects. And we actually just did a panel with them recently, you know, to get that connection. And, you know, initiatives like that, I think, are really important. You know, being able to partner up with associations like that is really cool. So yeah, I think the effort is there, and I just hope it really continues and voices continue to be listened to.
Yeah, those are all great points. I'm a big fan of like those organizations like Game Heads and stuff like that. Like those are great. I did a little bit of work over in Oakland, and I found it was like a really amazing experience. And you know, somebody in the chat right here said, "What is the advantage of a diverse workplace?" Right? Any
Oh, yeah,
thoughts on that? I have my thoughts, but
yeah. Well, imagine this: if you have literally the same person from the exact same background, from the exact same environment, you're most likely going to get the same viewpoint. And at that point, it just becomes an echo chamber. And a lot of times, particularly when you're working on a game, it's about problem solving. How do I make it look like X while also working like Z? And if you have a bunch of different people, or excuse me, if you have a bunch of the same people from the exact same backgrounds, the exact same viewpoints, you're going to get the same answer. But if you incorporate a bunch of different individuals from a bunch of different backgrounds, a bunch of different experiences, cultural beliefs, etc., you're going to have a kaleidoscope of options to help you solve that problem. And that also just makes you a better person because you get to listen to those different experiences, and that then instills, at least personally for me, it instills inspiration. So then I get further ideas for my art, my projects, you know, what I can do to further help my team.
I think that's a fantastic answer. I totally agree with that completely. You know, one of the sort of the perks to being a teacher is being exposed to so many cultures every semester, like, you know, viewpoints I'm not expecting, and learning things about other people's cultures and how they grew up and what their country is like. And it, for anybody who's a creative person, that sort of diversity and voice and thought is what adds to your own creative palette. It makes you more imaginative. So I think it's only a positive thing all the time. Kat, how about you? Like, how do you feel about the place you work? Does it feel like there's a good amount of diversity, opportunity? I mean, I know you haven't been there very long.
I will say, I kind of don't really have an answer at the moment because we're all virtual and I'm not seeing everyone. So I can't really say sometimes, but with my immediate team, I am the second woman on there right now. I don't know if they've had more women in the past or not, but admittedly, I think that is like the design field's not really open to women sometimes. Like some women don't really go into that. I think I'm like the only one I remember, like one of the like 3 from my field at school that like stuck with that because it's way more male dominated in that case. I think I don't want to say anything else isn't. It's just I've noticed that one, like some women don't even pursue it. I don't know what forces them not to, but I don't want to, I'm not sure if I really want to know the answer.
Yeah, I don't know about that. That is weird. The design specifically seems to have one of the biggest problems with diversity right now. And I don't quite know what that is. I think it'll be interesting to see like what the transition's like from, you know, during COVID where we're all on Zoom calls to what it's like when you're back in the office again. Like, how about like at Fogbank? Like, what was that experience like?
So that one is actually pretty interesting because we were working on a game that was 18 plus. So we were tackling a lot of these questions in our game. So there was a lot of things like, especially with V and I being Black women, sometimes we would look at them and say, the hair texture needs to look more like this, or this is how you take care of it. This is what you do, or this is how foundation looks on our skin, or things like that. Like for that different type of skin tone, there was a lot of research to be done because we were trying to go as hard as we can to represent a lot of people in those games.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And Danielle, how about your own experience? Like, do you feel like the places you've worked have consistently offered opportunity to everybody? Like, how do you feel about diversity in the workplace?
I've seen a massive change from when I started to now, I think. And that's partially just from where I was at the time and where I grew to. While I was working at Kixeye, I was the only woman on a team of 60. So definitely
60?
outnumbered there, 1
Wow.
to 60. And when I was young, I really ignored it, like stubbornly ignored it. I was like, I can do anything the boys can do. This doesn't matter. I can fit in here and live my life and do the things that I'm excited about. And it doesn't matter. I don't want it to matter. And I wanted to believe that for myself and for everyone. I want to believe that everyone has equal opportunity and that the world is what you make of it. It wasn't until a few years ago, I'm trying really hard to get better at talking about this because of this specific event that I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about. It was a social at Bungie, and it was a sort of minority social group event thing. And they had some really excellent speakers. And they were talking about this phenomenon that's been studied and is extremely common that I had never heard anyone talk about out loud before. But as soon as they said it, I was like, oh, geez, this is a thing. I need to pay more attention. And they were talking about the moment when you are the only viewpoint in a room and you feel as if you are representative. So Catherine, I think you just described it a little bit, like you were the only person on that team who had this hair texture. And so you feel like you have to represent everyone who has that hair texture and everyone is looking at you. And this sort of accompanied with the feeling of, if you mess up, then you are the example. And everyone who is like you has messed up. And that's sort of the feeling in the moment of, I can't mess up because I'm the only one here who is representing who I am and what I look like in the environment. And then all of my teammates will think that people who look like that screw up. So I really didn't want to be Daphne from Scooby-Doo, ever. And it really, I think it held me back a lot in my early career from asking questions, from being wrong. And mistakes are some of the most important things we make, and when it comes to getting better and growing and failing to improve, having the support of your teammates and trusting them and being okay making mistakes around them instead of turtling up and trying to pretend that you never make mistakes. It is a dangerous path to go down, and I'm still trying to get better at that. But Wizards was a really great example of, we got the question from the crowd, the advantage of a diverse workplace. The heroes of Magic the Gathering are amazing. You have all sorts of demographics in the card art, and all sorts of people can come to that art and they can see themselves in that, and they can say, like, I can totally be in this awesome, fantastic world and do these amazing magical things. And it's really good at engaging people and bringing them out of their shells and getting them to go to Friday Night Magic game stores and engage with other people. And it makes it matter a lot less what you look like, where you came from. And that was in contrast to Kixeye 1 in 60. Wizards was the first place where I was in a meeting room with all women. It was like 5 of us, but it was such an amazing feeling. They do a really good job, just the studio in general, of having all sorts of people work there. And there is value to the people working there. Like Maddie described, problem solving is best tackled by lots of different viewpoints. And I think you're a richer person when you get to interact with lots of people. But the business value is there too, right? Because for Magic, it broadens their audience, being able to reach out to all of these different sorts of people. And we are in an entertainment industry, and it is our job actually to engage lots of different people. And the better we are at that, the better we are at our job, and the better art that we make.
Yeah, and I think definitely like more diversity in the workplace sort of democratizes the gaming experience for everybody in a much better way, right? It's not like a bunch of white guys are sitting in a room trying to figure out the best card game for women in this certain age range, right? It's like, no, that diversity actually brings that voice in. And there's the challenge, of course, being the only voice in the room that represents that point of view can be challenging and intimidating, but again, more diversity invites more voices into the room and makes that process easier for everybody, I hope.
Yeah.
So
It's a positive cycle.
yeah, absolutely. I wanted to see, we're getting up on an hour and a half here, and I don't want to keep everyone that much longer. So I wanted to see if there are any questions from the audience, anything that anybody wanted me to ask. And I'll hang for a moment. Of course, I have tons of other stuff to talk about. I could talk for days, but I'm sure you don't all want to hear that. We had one question. Let me see, back up here. Okay, this is open to anybody. Can you describe a favorite piece of art you made or problem you solved while either at the university or at your job? And anybody can take this one. Everyone's all, where do I start? I have so many problems I can talk about that I solved. Come on, somebody's got to have one. I can kick us off if you'd like, but I'd rather hear from you.
I just talked a bunch, but my
You
favorite
did.
one was
Go for it.
definitely the depth art cards for Magic the Gathering. Since we're on the topic, I'll be quick so that everyone else can get in on this too. But as soon as I got to Magic or Wizards and got to work on Magic the Gathering, I was like, what is the coolest thing a tech artist could do for Magic the Gathering? Make a cooler foil card that is only going to work in digital. And so I got to design the new premium card art for Magic the Gathering Arena. And that was a really fun problem to solve. Required lots of shader writing and, again, pipeline setup, which shaders are definitely not my forte. So I had to learn a lot of new things. But digging into that problem and asking a lot of different people, what do you want to see the most out of a Magic card? What is the coolest Magic card that you can imagine? And we have draft nights every week at Wizards of the Coast. So I would ask all of the people and other players at Friday Night Magic.
That's awesome. I mean, that speaks to the thing, like I found professionally, like one of the strongest skills I have is saying yes to pretty much any task that crosses my plate. Even if I don't know what it is, like I have to animate a UI element. I've never done that before. But if I say no, then, what's my worth? I'd rather say yes and learn something new from that. So, and granted, we will all make mistakes while learning. That's part of the process, right? You can't be afraid to fail. So anybody else have something they solved where they're like, yeah, that was me. I solved that one.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think like just a good example maybe was like one of the first big problems I got to solve at work when I was working while working here at Visual Concepts. Just like it was my favorite in the fact that like it was one of the first big things they let me tackle like on my own, and I was literally just helping the artists with their workflow for exporting like blend shapes as corrective shapes. And just kind of like taking that workflow that they go through and trying to figure out the steps that I could combine or the things that I could automate to make it easier. That was like super, super amazing. And it kind of like showed me that that's the thing I like to do most. And now looking back on it, like I can see that, it still needs a lot of work, like I think that the first time I did it, I was so wrapped up in like, oh, I think this would be the best workflow that I wasn't necessarily talking to the artists constantly about, well, what is the best workflow for you, not what is just the ultimate workflow that I think it should be, So I think it's easy to get like wrapped up in that kind of thing if you're not like talking to other people and stuff like that. But yeah, just like basically anytime I get to solve some kind of problem like that is a joy to me.
And I think that in the game industry, like you don't necessarily get the fanfare when you solve a problem like that. It's not like there's a parade for you or anything like
True,
that.
true.
But you look
Except
around at your
for
coworkers and you see the satisfaction that, hey, I made their job a little bit easier or smoother.
yeah, definitely. Like that's really rewarding. And it is nice when somebody like slacks you and they're like, oh, that button you made was really amazing. Or like, you give them the tool and you show them and you press the button and you're demoing it and they're just all like, oh, like that's my favorite thing when artists go, oh, at a button you make for them.
I feel like we need a button making class at the School of Game Development now. I have to
Yes,
think about that one. Anybody else got anything they want to pitch in on that one?
I got something real quick.
Go for it.
So the really funny thing about one of this thing I'm going to talk about is it was never finished. But what I loved the most about working on this particular thing is they teamed me up with a level designer, and they were like, okay, guys, this entire area, and it was pretty big, needs a complete redo. So work together to do blockouts, gather references. My job is to make a kit with, as few pieces as humanly possible while still making it, enough so you don't see the repetition. And this designer and we hammered on this kit in this area for close to a month. And eventually we had to be pulled off and, prioritized to other areas. But we got it to a place where when, the lead designer and, other people were running around, they were like, we need to start teaming up designers and artists way sooner because this is probably one of the most fun spaces that we've blocked out at this point.
Cool.
And that whole process got me really, really comfortable with talking with the designer, working with the designer, making sure his needs and the game's needs and the player's needs was met first before I get all crazy and just start making things look pretty. Things need to function first, both from a player perspective, but also for the designer when he's snapping things together, and so forth. So that was a really, really fun area project that I worked on because of those reasons.
Cool. Kat, any thoughts?
Actually, I'm really happy you guys went before me because I finally came up with something. But at my last job, I was working, we were working on shows and stuff, and I'm about to talk about one that's unreleased, so I can't really divulge too many details or Disney will kill me. So it was one of those projects. I'm pretty sure everyone's gone through this too. It's one of those things where it's just nothing but bad luck was happening with it. So it was a very hard project to work on, and you just happen to get stuck with it. And you're the person who has to fix some of the stuff because you're the first one to touch it. And you're first one to see things that are wrong with it because this was a thing that was set up before you got here. And now you're doing things that are not in place when you that you're there now and you know those practices. So you have to apply that to something older. So there was a lot of that going on where I had to really, what's the word? Not manhandle, but I really had to just go way forward about it and be like, look, there's something wrong here. I gotta tell you guys this. I gotta tell you guys that. I gotta rush through this. And then actually, surprisingly, there's a little bit of Target I was doing there. It's a 2D game, and you had to take Photoshop files and cut pieces out. And because it's a mobile game, you had to optimize it. So I was so I would tell the director hey, look, I know you want this to look really pretty. It's really high pixels, but we're gonna compress it to 32 by 32.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's someone wants to make it look pretty, but you're the one who has to make sure it's efficient and doesn't blow up the phone. And you have to tell them, I have to make it smaller. I'm sorry. Don't zoom in on it, please. If you want it to look good.
I mean, it's important that you speak up and talk about these things too. It's critical, which is why I always get frustrated a little bit when I have classes that are so quiet. Yeah. I try to tell them the game industry is not necessarily a quiet place.
Yeah.
Right?
To all the students in the audience, seriously, open your mouth when you gotta. If you have a question, just ask. No one's gonna yell at you for having a question, especially if you're a new person. It's okay to ask a question because they'll expect you to ask questions. They'll be nervous if you're quiet, honestly, because it's are they getting it? Or are they not? I don't know. they won't know, they can't read your mind. You got to tell them what's on your mind.
Yeah, very true. And it's much better for me if I'm not just up there lecturing. If it's more of a conversation where I can hear what you want, that makes it more enjoyable for everybody. And that's the way collaboration and creativity work in the game industry. It's constantly a conversation between multiple people to figure out what to do, right?
Yeah. And my director, I swear, I love the guy. There are just times where I'm just like, please. I know you want it to look pretty, but you have to hear this. And he's like, I know, quiet.
Was that Ken?
No, actually, he was on my side most of the time.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And we're getting a whole bunch of like really big questions that are going to keep us here for like another hour. Like I wish they'd come up earlier.
I'm okay staying a little longer.
Me too.
Yeah, same.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I was going to go grab some dinner. No, I'm just kidding. I'll hang out too. That's fine. All right. I'll tell you what, let's compromise here. I'll broach one of these big questions and you can all take a shot at answering. And then we'll see how we're doing after that. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, that's a huge one. Let's see what the other one. We can kind of ask both of these. So the first one's for Krista and Danielle. They're saying, question, which path did you choose at AAU? I know we have character modeling, environment modeling, concept art, game design, but not one specifically for tech art. I'm about to choose spring classes. I would love to get some suggestions from you.
Yeah. For me, like, I kind of found out about tech art through the rigging classes. So I took like intro to rigging and I was like, yeah, this is cool. I like this. Let me just sign up for every rigging class possible. So I did that. I think it's a good idea too, to try and like diversify your rigging. Like it could be interesting to take some film rigging classes too, just to see how different that is from game rigging. I think that kind of diversified experience is probably really helpful. And then also like lots of scripting classes. Like I took every scripting class that was available to me. Like I took the Intro to Python class. I feel like in my advanced rigging class, there was also some like scripting. And then also I took the like scripting for 3D games classes, which was all stuff in like game engines, but it was still like really useful to like learn C# and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much, that's how I paved my own tech art path at AAU.
So I remember at the time, like you were one of the few people that was not only doing this in our department, but had sort of like very high visibility as far as doing it. So like when it came time for like projects, everyone was all like, oh, I want Krista on my team or whatever. Right? So that was a good thing. I think there's a few more people taking it now, but it's not, tech art is generally not something a lot of people think about.
Yeah. And
but it's incredibly valuable.
Oh, super, super valuable. I mean, I think like modern studios, I don't even know how they could get away without them, like without tech artists, people to help you optimize your pipeline and to like get assets into the game faster. Like it's just impossible. Yeah, I also took a lot of opportunities of collabs. Like I did as many collabs as possible because I knew that was going to be the closest I could get to an actual studio experience, working with people, going back and forth on assets and stuff, giving feedback, getting feedback. I knew that was going to be really valuable stuff. And it was like, I did all kinds of rigging in collabs. I even like, would just like show up to a collab that I wasn't signed up for and do some rigging for them and then like leave an hour later, so just
right.
like
That's
really,
amazing experience though. And I mean, even you definitely had some hits and misses as far as the projects you were on. So
definitely.
I mean, that's all great experience too. And I tell people like, your portfolios and your experience is not just made up of the assignments you're doing for class. It's like all the other stuff you do. Class is for learning. Everything else you do is for mastery, right? It's for getting out there and trying those things, right? Danielle, any other opinions or anything about tech art as far as like classes you should take? Or you mentioned talking to Phil Koffel. Phil Koffel is our tech art lead, in case you don't know, and he's very approachable and loves Star Trek. So he's a good one to talk to. Any other advice from you, Danielle?
I think Krista, you hit the nail on the head there. Pave your own path, and just know what you want to get out of your time at school. I got the most out of working really closely with the staff in the games department. I was in the first year of the games department, so we didn't really have all of these paths available. It was mostly, we were all trying to figure it out as we went. But I remember, just bringing a proposition to Chris and David at the time and saying like, hey, I would really like to do this as a class. Can I? And David was our sponsor, and he was like, yeah, I mean, let's figure it out. And then we got a bunch of other students together, and that was our first collab class. So if you have an idea of something that you want to work on and get better on, I think you're going to find a lot of support at the Academy, and just reach out. It sounds like Phil is a great person to spearhead that.
Yeah, it's weird. I've never seen so many questions about tech art before. This is great. Everything's all about tech art. Let's see if we got so as far as game animator rigor, I know that in my personal experience, as technology gets better, those processes get more complicated. So any advice for somebody just getting started off in animation or rigging?
I'd say get really comfortable, like kind of being uncomfortable. I don't know, like get really comfortable diving deep into that really technical stuff. Like I heard something really interesting once from I think from the technical art director at my job. He was like, there are two types of people when it comes to a technical challenge. There are people who will kind of like shy away from it and try and find a way around it. And then there will be people who like stand up to that challenge and like learn what they can to like get over that hump. And then that's like a new skill they have, basically. And I realized I was kind of one of those people sometimes who would try and weasel my way around this like technological problem because it scared me really bad to like not know what the hell I was doing. But I think like I really want to be more that person who like stands up to that technical challenge and like really gets into it. But I think, yeah, like start learning about, scary stuff like gimbal lock and joint orientation and like matrices and stuff like that. Like there's some of this stuff that you won't have time to get into at school because it's so deep and it's so like technical and stuff like that. But I don't shy away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even as a designer, I have to know about that stuff because the camera is parented to a bone and I have to know what that is and how it works. And if it breaks, I have to know if it's something I can fix. And so, I tell everybody, I think everybody should basically be like a sponge and just absorb everything they can from around them, from all the different disciplines, tools, skills, whatever. Like you make yourself a far more valuable employee if you have a specialty and then you know how to do a bunch of other stuff too. So let's see if we got any other questions. We've got lots of thank yous. That's nice. Well, thank you for the thank you. Let's see. Okay, I guess we can look at wrapping things up here. Any last words from any of you? Like, I always think like if I could go back in time and give myself one valuable piece of advice as far as my career, what would it be? For me, just to kick it off, would be don't work such crazy hours. That's mine because I passed up on a lot of my life doing that. And so if I could go back and tell myself, that's what I would tell myself. How about the four of you? What are some parting words?
I'll go just really quick because I have one in mind. If you're at work and you're working on something you don't like, speak up, because I've definitely been like an intern at work and been like, well, they gave me this, so I have to do it. And in one of my exit interviews for an internship, like the CEO and I were talking and she was like, yeah, it was at like a startup. So it was like small. So I was talking to the CEO for my exit interview, but she was like, yeah, I noticed you kind of like lost your fire the last 6 months. Like what happened there, And I was like, well, I was doing this like kind of boring task that I didn't really like that much, and like it like paled in comparison to what I was doing before, but I didn't really think I had a choice. And she was like, that's crazy. You should have like spoken up. Like we could have found somewhere else for you, like, or found something else for you to be doing, So I like allowed myself to be really like, grumpy and uninspired because I didn't speak up about the fact that I didn't like what I was working on, because you're going to work better if you like what you're doing. So your job has some kind of investment in allowing you to do the work that you want to do. It's not always going to be possible 100% of the time, but do your best, to communicate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the finished product will reflect the passion you had for making it, right? And yeah, there are going to be days at work when it will just be a job, right? It's not the magical video game factory today. It's like, it's a job and it kind of sucks, but that's what life is all about. Anybody else? Parting words?
I'll go. Definitely take advantage of the time that you have while you're in school. The resources, the time, the ability to screw up really, really badly and not end up on the street because of it, if you're in a situation where that could happen. You have teachers here who know what they're talking about. And I know it's sometimes really easy to be like, yeah, okay, dad, whatever. Like, I know what's better. You don't. Trust me, you don't. That's not to say follow blindly, but if someone gives you advice, definitely sit on it and consider it, and still ask questions and challenge the teachers. They want to be challenged. They want to have nice, interesting conversations. The other thing is, you're not going to learn everything in school, and that's totally okay, because there's a whole lot of things that go into making a game, regardless of your specialization. But that doesn't mean that just because school isn't teaching you it, that you should be ignorant about it. So, for environment art, okay, I've heard about this thing called trim sheets, or utilizing vertex colors to do multiple material blends. If you haven't gone over that and it's like your senior year, maybe you should look into it. There's a ton of YouTube videos out there, that type of stuff. Your education is a starting point. You should definitely be building up on it, because guess what? When you're at work and someone says, man, I don't know how to do this, guess who's looking on YouTube for guides of what to do if no one has an answer? You need to have that innate sense of curiosity, and to push yourself further. So those would be my parting words for you all.
Yeah, I think those are great. Just today, I'm always impressed by people who have a natural sense of curiosity and take advantage of it. And like today, for example, I had a student in one class who got a really poor grade on an assignment. And she asked me, hey, would you mind taking a look at this if I redid this assignment? And I said, well, okay, it might not be a better grade. And she's like, no, I just want to redo it and try it and see if I can do better on it.
Most definitely.
Like, yes.
Yeah, you need to be proactive. If you're not doing too hot, reach out to your teacher. Reach out to resources. They're here for you. If you want to be better, try to make it happen as best as you can.
Absolutely. Kat, any parting words?
Honestly, I'm drawing a blank again. But honestly, I think something I would have told myself back then is that me having a passion prior to game design isn't a waste. There's a lot of stuff you can look back on, stuff that you learned back then and things that you learn now that can work in conjunction. Like that, kind of going back to like a diversity, like think about all these different experiences you've had. That makes you so unique. Like there's nothing wrong with like having different like things. Like, oh my God, I like meteorology. Like no one likes that. Who cares? It's like, well, that could be something associated with me. Like, it's okay if you have like a weird interest or something like that. You can make that your signature. Like that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being like a more unique or think like you don't have to blend in with everyone. I would say do your hardest to outshine each other. I want to see a bunch of stars out there.
Absolutely. And one of the things I remember about Kat is the class that I had her in, we actually had to, I forget why we skipped a class, but I had to like not teach one weekend.
And I think it was a holiday.
Was it a holiday?
I think it was.
Teachers don't get holidays, so sometimes we know what a holiday is. But I remember I had the makeup class on a weekend, and Kat was the only person who showed up to the makeup class, and we played The Last Guardian. And I was like, This is-
Yeah.
Like this is fun, and I am so glad you made it here and everything. So yeah.
I was surprised no one showed up. I was like, we're playing games. Come on.
Oh, you'd be surprised how many people don't like playing games for a game department. It's astonishing. All right, Danielle, any parting words from you?
I think I'll jump off of what Krista was saying and just say, try and find the coolest thing that you specifically can do, whatever the opportunity is. Like wherever you find yourself, take a moment to think, like when I'm done with this opportunity, what will have been the coolest thing that I could have brought to the situation, and try and make it happen. So you'll probably get hired for a job and someone will probably say like, I think I really need this thing. And you might spend a little bit of time doing that, but likely while you're there, you'll see a lot of value that you can bring to the place, and no one will know what that is better than you do. So.
Yeah, great words of wisdom there. I always think about, I'll leave us on these parting words. There's a show I like called Mad Men, and there's a character in there named Bobby Barrett. And she says, think of a job and be the person that does that job, right? So, you have to think about, what is that thing I've always wanted to do? There's no reason, if you don't have the passion and the curiosity and the drive, that you can actually do that thing. So anyway, I want to thank everybody tonight. So thank you, Krista and Kat and Danielle and Maddie. Thank you so much for showing up and giving us your time. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to everybody in the audience who stuck with us and listened to all of this. I hope it was informative and entertaining. And we'll be sure to have another one of these events in the near future. So that's all we have tonight. Good night to everybody and take care. Are we off? Or everyone just heard me say that in the world, right?
It stopped. It looks like it stopped recording.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't even have to say pineapple. Was that
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
everybody?
Oh yeah, totally.